Hey, you're listening to the Riverdale podcast. This is episode number 99. My name is Jonathan. Welcome to lovely Riverdale, USA. This is a weekly Archie Comics fan podcast. We update every Saturday morning, and every week we break things down into 4 categories. The first category is the book of the week. That's the comic book I read this week. Sometimes it's a new comic book, sometimes it's an old comic book, but it's always an Archie comic book. We move then to the news of the week. That's what happened in the world of Archie in the week since our last podcast. Then on to new releases. That's what it came out this past Wednesday. Will be coming up this coming Wednesday from Archie. And we're going to wrap up this week talking about the April solicits. The solicitations from Archie for the upcoming books in April came out just this week. We're going to hit some highlights there. Before we get into the episode, I want to remind everyone that you've got a few more days to get your questions in for Dan Parent. Of course, next week is going to be our 100th episode. Dan Parent will be our guest. And if you have a question for Dan Parent, you can submit that through Monday the 27th. I have more details about how to do that at the end of the show. But by all means, get those questions in. Let's get into the book of the week for now. This week's book of the week is Betty and Veronica Double Digest number 220. I know a lot of you are thinking that Archie's Funhouse number 1 came out this week. And I picked that up. I checked it out. But my heart was set on reading the Betty and Veronica Double Digest. Part of that is full-on nostalgia. It's this time every year that I go back and look at a Betty and Veronica Double Digest. I guess I look for a few throughout the year. But Betty and Veronica Double Digest was, in fact, the first comic to be reviewed on the Riverdale podcast back in episode 1, which I do not suggest that you listen to for a lot of reasons. But this cover was actually pretty nostalgic of that one. I'm forgetting the issue number now. But having these sort of bikini-clad Betty and Veronica covers in the middle of winter is something of a tradition. And having said that, the cover is by Dan Parent with inks by Bob Smith. And it's Betty and Veronica. It looks like it could have been a beach issue that they just sort of repurposed with the text of Veronica saying to Betty, "Can you believe we traveled 10,000 miles to have a winter swimsuit cover?" Nevertheless, really charming. It's a great pink color to the logo at the top. A great looking cover. And I've said it before. I love the wraparound onto the spine. I like the spine treatment with the character at the top. So when you've got them lined up on your bookshelf, you've got the characters looking right at you. That's a lot of fun. But we have 160-odd pages to get through. We're going to hit the highlights. First off, we have Kiss and Tell. This was scripted and penciled by Dan Parent, inks by Jim Amish, letters by Therese Davidson, colors by Barry Grossman. This is a super fun story. I had never seen this one before. In this story, Veronica is given a lip-shaped necklace, and when she kisses someone, she is able to see, through the power of that necklace, she's able to see their first kiss and who they kissed first. So this initially becomes interesting when she kisses her parents good night, and sees their first kisses, and then becomes a bit of a sort of sleuthing and troublemaking kind of adventure when she wants to know who all of her friends' first kisses were. That's a really, really fun story. There are a couple of nearly identical stories here up front, in which Veronica invites Betty on a trip, and Betty has a complete misunderstanding as to where they're going. So much so that I read this earlier in the week. When I went back, I was confusing the two stories. Nevertheless, two fun stories there. One thing that I generally love about these stories, and I've talked about this before, one of the things I really love when going through Double Digest is looking at the artwork and not looking at the credits and trying to decide who's drawn the particular stories. I was really, really bad at it this issue, which is good and bad. I like the fact that this issue had a bunch of different pencilers and a bunch of different inkers. So even the Dan DeCarlo stuff inked by Jimmy DeCarlo looks slightly different than the stuff that Alison Flood inked. And just things like that. There's a variety to the styles in here that I like a lot. We got a big chunk of stories in here of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. The first one is Hot Spell, in which Sabrina and her aunts are sick of the cold weather and decide to go to Hawaii. This story was scripted and penciled by Dick Malgrim, inks by John D'Agostino, letters by Bill Yoshida, colors by Barry Grossman. And Dick Malgrim, I believe, did a lot of work on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and is not a creator, unfortunately, that I immediately associate with those characters. But his line is great, and his rendering of Sabrina is really spot on and really on model. If you're looking at that initial Dan DeCarlo kind of model of what Sabrina looks like, I would place this story somewhere in the 70s, because Sabrina's look seems to have migrated a little bit from her first appearances in the 60s into something that's not unlike the Filmation cartoon version of her in here. There's just some good slapstick in here. Some great grimaces. There's a scene when Sabrina and Zelda and Hilda are each being hit on the head with coconuts, and there's just this brilliant kind of grimaces on their faces, and big squiggly lines of confusion over their heads as they're sort of smarting. And after another great Sabrina story by Dick Malgrim, we get The Cure, the story of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. This is scripted by George Glader, of course, the creator of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, who we lost just last year, and pencils by Bob Bowling. Cool to see Bob Bowling drawing Sabrina. He does a great Sabrina. She looks terrific. Inks on this story by John D'Agostino, letters by William Saburo, and colors, as always, by Barry Grossman. In this story, which aunt is this? Aunt Hilda. It is decided that Aunt Hilda needs to see a shrink, and when the shrink comes to the house, Hilda has a few surprises for him and sends him screaming out the door. Super simple, super fun story. Throughout here, we also get some great fashion pages. I love fashion pages, especially when they're drawn by Dan DeCarlo, which I assume that those are. We get a big chunk in here of sports-related stories. We get a really cool story where Chuck Clayton has this huge ego, and so Betty and Veronica and Chuck's dad, Coach Clayton, Floyd Clayton, play a trick on him to get him sort of back on track. But we've got basketball stories. We've got sort of an ill-placed baseball story in here. There's a really fun story of Betty inviting Ethel to come teach her kids. Some kids she's coaching basketball for, how to be persistent. That's a really, really sweet story. And there's a great moment in here where Veronica somehow gets her way onto the baseball team. Seems a little early for baseball stories, but nonetheless, super fun. Veronica finds that the women's softball team is not sufficiently funded, and goes to Mr. Weatherby, and doesn't just invoke the name of Title IX, insofar as equal rights for women in sports teams, but holds up an actual piece of paper that says Government Regulations Title IX. And there's a terrific proceeding panel in which Mr. Weatherby is just sweating profusely and looking very, very upset, which he mostly is for the rest of the story, as Veronica is making her demands. So definitely sets it at a time period, but a cool story. We got a story drawn by Doug Crane, and I love Doug Crane's rendering of the characters. Inks on this story by Rudy Lepic, and that really brings in his line a little bit. The thing I like about Doug Crane is he's off-model a little bit in this really charming way. I like the way he renders faces. And with Rudy Lepic's inks, that sort of wrangles him in a little bit more, I think, in terms of drawing him closer to the house style. But it's a good look. I really, really like this story. It's a heartwarming story as well, involving generosity. Where are we? We've got quite a few more pages. We've got about 50 pages to go here. Some great Dan DeCarlo, Allison Flood stuff. There's a real pocket of those stories from the late 80s into like the mid 90s where Dan DeCarlo worked with inker Allison Flood, and I really think that's some of his best art. That's a real great time for him, and that is coincidentally the time when I first started reading Archie comics, so I'm sure that has something to do with my fondness for that era. We also got, as I'm flipping through here, some great Dexter Taylor Little Archie stories towards the back of the book. I love Little Archie, and I especially love Dexter Taylor's rendition of those characters. If you're unaware of his work, it is fantastic. There's obviously a classicness to Bob Bowling's rendering of those characters, but man, do I love the way that Dexter came in and did those stories. Wrapping up, we got some more Doug Crane art, a story by Kathleen Webb called My Secret Valentine, definitely bringing you into the Valentine season. All in all, I've said enough about this week's book of the week, Betty and Veronica number 220. Not much more you can say about this stuff. It's a collection of brilliant writing and art from a number of decades in a tiny little book that fits in your back pocket that costs $3.99. You really, I know I'm preaching to the choir here because I know you are already out there looking for your copy of Betty and Veronica Double Digest number 220, our book of the week. All right, in Archie news this week, a couple of interesting stories. First up, as I said at the top of the show, we'll be talking about the April solicits for this week. The April solicits this week towards the end of the show. But couldn't pass up mentioning that over at the 13thdimension.com, they posted a story about one of those solicits, which is in response to Archie number 655. It's an upcoming issue written by Tom DeFalco, coming back to Archie, doing some great work as always, and penciled by Fernando Ruiz. This is the story of Cosmo the Merry Martian. This is the issue that we have been waiting for. When I talked to Fernando last year, you can go back and listen to that episode. We talked a bit about his love of Cosmo the Merry Martian and the way he has gone through and fit Cosmo into a number of stories as a background character, usually as an object, as a cup or a doll or a poster or whatever. And this is Fernando's big chance to draw Cosmo. And not only that, he's drawing an issue in which Cosmo meets up with the Riverdale gang, meets Archie, Veronica, Jughead, the whole gang. Looks like a lot of fun. And over at the 13thdimension.com, they talked briefly to Fernando and to Tom DeFalco. So if you want the scoop on that, you'll definitely want to see those covers. There's a couple of covers. The variant cover is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Really, really excited about this issue. Also, later this week, just yesterday, on Comic Book Resources, Mega Man X. There's a story there. They're talking to writer Ian Flynn and editor Paul Kaminsky about the introduction of Mega Man X into the Mega Man comic book. Mega Man X is sort of an alternate timeline or an alternate future 100 years off from the events of Mega Man. And they're bringing these in. We talked about this a few months ago, but they are bringing in the Mega Man X story in some backups in the next 2 issues of Mega Man. Mega Man's numbers 34 and 35. Apparently, I found out in this article that Mega Man X is going to play a prominent role in the Free Comic Book Day issue. They're doing a flip book this year of Mega Man and Sonic the Hedgehog. And Mega Man X will play a big role there. And from my understanding of the article, it's going to depend greatly on people's response to those stories as to whether they go ahead and do further Mega Man X stories. But there has been a lot of fan demand for those. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Interesting. I'm excited to check those out. I read the Mega Man title regularly anyway, so I'm excited to see what Mega Man X is all about. So that is your news for the week. Again, over at the 13th Dimension, we've got Cosmo showing up in Archie number 655. And over on Comic Book Resources, we get Mega Man X showing up in the Mega Man title. Head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. In the post for this episode, you'll find links to both of those stories. All right, new releases. New releases for this past Wednesday, January the 22nd, are Archie's Funhouse #1, brand new #1 double digest. That is $3.99. Of course, also this week's book of the week came out just this past Wednesday. Betty and Veronica Double Digest number 220 for $3.99. Also this week, World of Archie Double Digest number 36 for $3.99. New trade paperback, Archie's Valentine, a rock and roll romance. It's a $10.99 trade paperback that collects the Dan Parent scripted and drawn Archie Marries Valerie storyline from just about a couple years ago now. So that's a 4-issue collection, I believe, for $10.99. That's a great deal. And lastly, this past Monday the 22nd, we got Mega Man Volume 6, Breaking Point. That is $11.99. Moving ahead to this coming Wednesday the 29th, we're going to get Archie Double Digest number 248 for $3.99, and Sonic the Hedgehog Archives Volume 22 for $7.99. This collects Sonic the Hedgehog 83 and 84, and Sonic Super Special number 13. Over on the digital side of things, we got an interesting digital exclusive this week. This is Gridiron Glory. It's a $4.99 150-page digital exclusive. It's all apparently football stories. I wouldn't have thought that we had that many football stories. Apparently, they exist. There are at least 150 pages of them. So you can check that out on digital.archiecomics.com or anywhere you get your digital comics. Gridiron Glory, that is your digital exclusive of the week. So that's going to do it. Those are your new releases for this past Wednesday the 22nd, this coming Wednesday the 29th, and your digital releases for the week from Archie. Finally today, earlier this week, Archie released their April solicitations. This is how the comic book market works. Everything is solicited 3 months in advance. Initially, these solicits would go out to retailers. Retailers would be able to put in their orders and purchase their books 3 months ahead of time, and they'd show up. Of course, that whole thing has migrated to us, the consumer, and now we see the solicits 3 months in advance as well. Enough of the history lesson. I wanted to bring this up because April had some cool, exciting stuff. Of course, as we already talked about earlier in the news portion of the show, Archie 655, which is going to feature Cosmo the Merry Martian. I am thrilled to death about that. Really, really, really excited. So that was the first thing that caught my eye right off the bat. But also, we got in the solicits, Afterlife with Archie, the first trade. This is collecting the first 5 issues. This is a $17.99 trade paperback, coming in at 160 pages. So it'll be interesting as we get closer to see what is going into that. Obviously, there's some bonus content in there. I don't know if the backup stories that are appearing in the original issues are going to be in there. I'm not sure if we'll get... I would assume / hope that we'd get a cover gallery of all those great variant covers. I'm not sure what's going to fill in the rest of those pages, but 160 pages, $17.99 seems like a good deal. I think a lot of people have heard a lot of buzz about that and are going to be picking that up in trade when that comes out in April. Also coming up this April, the Archie 1,000-page comics bonanza. This is the 4th 1,000-page collection in a year. I think they've all come out over the last calendar year, which is crazy. It's 1,000 pages of comics for $14.99. And these last 2 are maybe the most exciting for me. The April issue of Betty and Veronica Friends Double Digest, this is number 238, features... it says on the cover, a special feature in this issue, Diary of a Girl Next Door. This, I am assuming, is a preview of this upcoming book that we've, there's an Amazon solicitation for it. There was some discussion of it in a Bleeding Cool article that came out last fall that discussed a bunch of Archie's book plans for 2014. But what we know about the upcoming original graphic novel, Diary of a Girl Next Door, Betty, is that the creative team is Tanya Del Rio, Giselle, and Bill Galvin. And if there are 3 people whose work we adore and don't see enough of in the world of Archie Comics, it is by far Tanya Del Rio, Giselle, and Bill Galvin. So I'm excited to see actually what this is, how the artwork is being split up, whether Tanya is entirely writing or whether she's drawing in it as well. Just how the labor is broken up in that. But I guess we'll have to wait until April to see our first sneak peek of what that is. And I think the book itself is set to be shipped later in the summer, maybe in July or August. But this is something that I had seen those rumblings about back in the fall, and I'm super, super, super impatient to find out exactly what's going on with that book. And finally, in the solicits, the thing that was maybe the best value, maybe the most thrilling in terms of what we might see in the future from Archie Comics, solicited for April, is the complete Sabrina the Teenage Witch, 1962 to 1971. Of course, Sabrina premiered in Madhouse, Archie's Madhouse comics in 1962, as sort of a host, a side character. And I am not really aware of how she got to where she is now. I'm excited to see these comics collected. I'm not clear on when she got her own series or anything like that, but this is what we'll find out in this volume. This is a 512-page black and white collection for $9.99. We get the first 10 years of Sabrina's appearances in a trade for $9.99. I am excited personally to see that black and white line art, most, if not all of which, is Dan DeCarlo, and we so rarely get to see his line uncolored and stuff. And I've read a lot of the Marvel Essential editions, the DC Showcase editions, which are a similar concept. They're a big page count on an inexpensive paper stock in black and white, and it's great to see those pages, that sort of dynamic line work from that era without the color. I think it gives you a better appreciation sometimes, especially with the coloring of that era. It's better to see the line art in black and white. And I think it goes without saying that a lot of this stuff has never been reprinted. This is really, really exciting. I had talked a while ago about how great it would be. I guess it was when Archie started doing the Sonic collections, not unlike this, the big 500 pages with 20 or so issues inside of each one. How great it would be to have like a She's Josie collection, or a Josie and the Pussycats collection, or Ginger or Wilbur or anything like that, where the content is out there. It's hard to come by outside of a digital means, I guess. I guess a lot of this stuff is available digitally. But just to see this stuff in print again, available out to the public, and in such an inexpensive model, and at such a low price point, super, super cool. And I guess we'll leave it there. Archie's April solicits are really, really exciting. You can head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. I posted this just earlier this week, should be just a few posts back on the blog. And check out those covers. There's a lot of great Jeff Schultz covers this month. Some variants that he did as well. Great stuff from Archie coming in April. There are a couple of quick and easy ways to help out the show financially if you would like to do so. You can always, any time of the day or night, head over to RiverdalePodcast.com and click that donation button. You can leave $2, $3, $10, $100. Don't leave $100. That's weird. You can drop a couple bucks in there if you appreciate the show. You can also head over to RiverdalePodcast.com and click any of those links on the page for TIFA, Things from Another World. This is a massive online comic book store. Anything you get in your comic shop, you can get at Things from Another World at great discounted prices. Head over there to get all of your great Archie Archives hardcovers. Scoop up all of those IDW artist-specific Archie books. Get your Harry Lucy, your Dan DeCarlo, your Stan Goldberg-specific IDW books. Those are going to be out of print before you know it. Lots of great stuff at Things from Another World. So head over to RiverdalePodcast.com, click on that link, and a percentage of what you spend after clicking on that link will be sent back to the show to help support us, keep the lights on, quote-unquote, the lights on, pay for hosting costs, pay for comic books. You know the deal. So head over to Riverdale Podcast, click those links, and thanks for considering that. On the way out, I want to remind everyone that next week will be our 100th episode. I am overjoyed. I'm really, really thrilled about this. And I'm especially thrilled because next week we will have Dan Parent on the show as our very, very special guest. And he will be answering some of my questions, and he will be answering some of your questions. I've got a bunch of questions so far by email. I would love to have a few more by phone. If you have a question for Dan Parent, you can send it to riverdale.podcast@yahoo.com, or you can call in. I would love to get a few more calls to play back on the show, have a few more voices in the conversation. The number to call in is 573-427-2443. That's 573-4-ARCHIE. I just can't say enough about how much fun this show is going to be and how much I'm looking forward to it and how proud I am of the podcast for making it to 100 episodes. I couldn't have done it without all of your support, and I actually haven't done it yet, so stick around, come back next week, and we'll see if I made it. Head over to riverdalePodcast.com. There you're going to find a link to email the show at riverdalePodcast.com. You'll find a link to follow us on Facebook, to follow us on Twitter, to like us on Facebook. Find a link there to subscribe on iTunes. If you're subscribed on iTunes, I would love for you to leave a review. Helps people find the show, bumps us up in the algorithm. If people are looking for Archie Comics content, they will find us more readily. Also, the Riverdale podcast is syndicated over at firstcomicsnews.com. Head over to firstcomicsnews.com for all of your comics news, reviews, podcast, lots of great stuff going up there every single day. firstcomicsnews.com. I'm also putting up more, better, greater content over at riverdalePodcast.com. As I said, the April solicits are up there. We're posting previews for Wednesday's books. Those are going up generally Tuesday morning. So if you haven't spent any time over at riverdalePodcast.com, now is the time to do it. I guess that's everything. Again, my name is Jonathan, and I'll see you again next week for episode number 100 here in lovely Riverdale, USA.